Good overnight. Welcome on into the overnight edition of From Day One. Art Bell Part 2 is up tonight, and I will apologize for last night's abrupt conclusion. We had a traffic accident happen just outside of GC Central here, which caused me to kind of get delayed away from the computer for about the last 10 minutes of the show, and hence the quick and a little bit out of breath closure of yesterday's program. With that being said, we're going to go back just a few minutes to after Rogan was finished to start tonight's content as we rock through Dominion. Come on. If I can get the tape to play.
Take a ride. Your conductor, Art Bell, will punch your ticket when you call 1-952-CALL-ART. That's 1-952-225-5278.
All right, the show goes on. Joe Rogan was awesome. Oh, by the way, I want to thank David Rubini for helping with the booking of Joe Rogan. That was a blast. That guy is something else. He was serious about the deprivation chamber invitation, as well as the other one, but that's the one I'm really interested in. I would dearly love to give that a shot. All right, coming up now, David Serada. Believe it or not, I hate stuff. I really hate reading this. Began his career by being interviewed by me. For the first time in the year 2000, he was a regular guest on the show and has been since seen on Ancient Aliens, History Channel, TLC, Fox News, CNN, Toast for the past 15 years. David Serada did his first radio show appearance in the year 2000 with me on the NASA UFO phenomena. The NASA STS-75 UFO's pulse and the frequency use of pulsing by ETs. After seeing a UFO in '68 with dozens of other witnesses in Berkeley, David's first aspiration in life was to become an astronaut or to learn how to make ET contact. Interesting choice, but kind of related, really, I guess. He studied world religions, meditation, yoga, nuclear fusion for nearly a decade with world-class physicists. He brings you his personal experience with ET contact and human transformation, as well as scientific understanding. Hello there. Again, David did his first radio show appearance in 2000 with me. So it's interesting now to have him back. David, welcome back to the program. You are there somewhere. Hello?
Sure, there you are. 1999 or 2000, yeah. I can't remember.
Well, a long time ago anyway.
Yeah.
All right. This is going to be an interesting evening. You have sent me some audio files, which I am prepared, by the way, to play when we get to that point. Mm-hmm. You're claiming, David, that you have made ET contact, right?
I am claiming that, yeah. I mean, after an entire life of trying to figure this out, going back to my UFO sighting in Berkeley in 1968, which was followed by contact with Pleiadian beings in my sleep, at a time when there was no such thing as ufology and there was no such thing as, the Art Bell Show, so I didn't know where to go with it at the time. But it's taken me my whole life, I'm 54 this week, to figure it out.
Yeah, that's true. Before this kind of thing really began, there was nowhere to go, except maybe a psychiatrist by recommendation or something like that.
Yeah, my dad was getting his, we're Canadians who moved to Berkeley in 1964, and my dad, Lynn Serada, was getting his PhD in psychology there. And when I told him and my mom that I saw the flying saucer, I mean, they didn't even say anything. They really didn't know what to make of it. But this was a daytime thing, walking home from elementary school at the in the East Bay near the Berkeley campus. We were living in the University Village, and everybody saw this thing. I mean, it looked like one of the Meyer craft, but this is 1967 or 68, so it's before he took all those photos. And in the following days, beings identified the Pleiades star system not using the name Pleiades. They were very tall and kind, and they paralyzed me in the very famous classic case of sleep paralysis, and started showing me how their craft worked. And, right at that pivotal time in 1967, 68, my mom was divorcing my dad because...
I was going to go back to you
Yeah.
telling your parents. I mean, that's really something to do. Mom, Dad, I'm in contact with others. And then I suppose once you were out of earshot, they were asking each other, did you drop them? No, honey. Did you drop them? Wondering about you. How did they take it?
Well, actually, my mom did drop me. She rolled me off the dining room table. She finally told me only a few years ago.
Was it me? Was this? Well, obviously far after you told them that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, no, they dropped me before when I was only a few weeks old. When my mom was changing the diapers, she didn't think babies at that age would roll over. I rolled over and hit the floor, and she raced me to the hospital. But this was something everybody saw. I mean, there was pandemonium on the street. It wasn't the Goodyear blimp. This thing was a flying saucer, and the only thing I could relate it to was the Star Trek crew and the Enterprise, and no markings, not a single rivet. This thing was down close so that everyone could see it. And remarkably, many years later, I was lecturing at a UFO convention for Bob Brown in Nevada. Actually, one of the last conferences he ever did. I gave the very last lecture under Bob Brown in his entire career there. And this man approaches me in the elevator, and he said, I work at the Space Lab at the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab right up on the hill. And I said, oh, yeah, I've been there. I actually had lunch with Glenn Seaborg there, who was chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission under Kennedy, Johnson, and Nixon, and the scientist who discovered the explosive type of plutonium, won the Nobel Prize. And I said, I even told Glenn Seaborg, that I saw the UFO, and this lab would have had a good view of it. Well, this gentleman told me, I work at the lab, I'm a scientist at the Space Lab, and in 1972, all of us saw a flying saucer come right up to the window. And that would have been a great, many very, very prominent scientists working up at that lab who saw it.
And how many of them wanted to talk about it?
And not one. And Seaborg didn't look at me crazy that day when I said I saw the saucer. He said his assistant, Albert Giorso, had 37 levels above top secret, he told me Seaborg had. And Seaborg said, there's nobody working on anything like that in our government. So he said, I don't know what it was.
Was it Close Encounters of the Third Kind? I think it was where they were showing the air traffic controller and the plane saw a UFO just right by it. The controller said, you want to report this? No, I don't want to report one of those.
Well, that's my favorite movie of all time, so I know that scene so well. And exactly. So what do you do in 1968? There's no UFO conventions that I knew of. I mean, I'm a kid, and they're appearing to me over and over, and I'm starting to play kick the can and hide and go seek with my friends. We moved to the San Francisco side of the Bay. We were living on the Berkeley side at that time. And I'm counting to 100, looking at the Pleiades and remembering the star system, remembering them, and replaying the memory of the flying saucer in my head over and over and over again. And I would never even blink the rest of my life until in 1972-ish, 73, the Meyer story was on the news in Canada. We moved back to Canada to live with my real father because my mom divorced again. And then I said, oh my God, that's what I saw. So that was the beginning of being able to place the experience. But to not make contact with them again my entire life didn't make any sense. Why would they, single me out in the crowd? And I don't know how many other kids or people.
They always single people out. No question about it. Listen, let me back up a little bit. You're going to talk a lot about quantum physics, I believe, tonight, in the sense that you believe that quantum communication is going to be possible. Is that correct?
Electrically possible, yeah.
Electrically, okay. I still don't have a grasp of quantum physics. Now, I'm not sure anybody really does, but there's this thing called entanglement. You know about that, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Nobody can really explain it, and I don't expect you to. But if you have any thoughts on it, I'd love to hear them, because I'm struggling with it.
Well, okay, so going back to the time of Einstein and many of his co-researchers, and Einstein was not an educated physicist. He was self-taught, self-educated,
Right.
and became a Nobel Prize winner. And all his peers, who are in my appearance, in my mind, are much more brilliant than he is. The way they appear in my mind, I mean. And Niels Bohr, Heisenberg, and these guys are saying that there's something going on when researchers are getting near the experiments. Their consciousness seems to be affecting the behavior of the particles when you're looking at these explosions of subatomic particles in bubble chambers and cloud chambers, which is how they used to photograph subatomic particle explosions. So that was the beginning of the idea that consciousness was part of the whole thing, the whole universe. And Einstein really agreed that there was something going on, and so did Max Planck, and so did Niels Bohr. All of them did. All of them knew. And then there was this thing that Einstein called spooky action at a distance, was
Right.
that, normally communication via radio or the internet like we're using now, everything travels through electromagnetism at the speed of light, which is very slow, at 186,282 miles per second.
Right.
So Einstein noticed there was this function in the atom and smaller. Quantum mechanics is generally looking at functions in the atom and smaller, and nowadays it seems to include the study of consciousness, but consciousness is not exclusive.
Well, I can see how consciousness will get involved in this, maybe. But, the whole idea that it's so simple and so impossible, this entanglement business, and that is where one flips and the other flops.
Right.
And it'll do it reliably. If you do a flip here, it'll flop there. And you can separate these by thousands of miles, 5 feet, or you could take one to the moon and they would be flipping and flopping in unison, in apparent communication with each other at much greater than the speed of light, in fact, immeasurably fast. And we have no clue how that's happening. There has to be a communication. There has to be a communication going on, or how can one flip and the other know to flop?
Exactly. That's exactly it. It's called action at a distance, and it's faster than light. It's instantaneous, but it's not relying on the electromagnetic spectrum or radio waves to communicate.
Right, I'm with you there.
Yeah, so they don't as a wave. So because they can't see the wave, or of course we don't know how to measure wavelengths even at the Planck length or smaller, the smallest units ever measured. So we don't know if it's a wave or not, actually, but we know it's there, and scientists know it's there, and it's been notable since the time of Einstein, Niels Bohr, and Planck, and all of the great masters. So why aren't we using it? And we are. I'm going to be talking about tonight how I've been able to use it in talking to very distant star systems.
Well, look, here's the deal. Here's the deal. If we are ever going to get to another star system, we're going to have to figure out how this communication works and either use it to communicate or use it in some way to travel, because, I don't know, this recent Earth 2 they found, it's 1,000 light years away. 1,000 light years. So we're not
very far, actually.
Well,
incredibly close. This is where it gets really exciting for me, because you're a radio man. You know how radio works.
I know how long it would take for radio to get there at current speeds.
Yeah, but so I'll tell you how the quantum function works and how we can use it, and why this Russian billionaire Yuri Milner is wasting his money looking at radio waves.
All right, wait, hold on. We have to do a break. Hold on. We have to do a break. You're going exactly where I want you to go. Yes, there's a Russian that's given a lot of money so we can keep looking to the stars, keep listening for signals, and my guest, David, thinks it's all wrong.
All those happy days, they seem so hard to find. I tried to reach for you, but you have closed your mind. Whatever happened to our love?
Absolutely. Listen to me. Oh! I despise. Cause it means destruction of this life. Clock strikes 12, and midnight in the desert. Desert is pounding packets your way on the Dark Matter Digital Network. To call the show, please direct your finger digits to dial 1-952-225-5278. That's 1-952-CALL ART.
David Serada is here, and just a few nights ago, not very many nights ago, we had Seth Shostak here. Seth is, of course, the head of SETI, and he would be, I'm sure, distressed to hear what David is about to say, as would the Russian billionaire, I guess. He's given a lot of money so they can keep searching for radio signals from elsewhere, right? And actually, you think it's a big waste of money, or rubles, whatever.
Rubles, money, time, and I think even Seth knows it, that they're just, so bored over there, probably far more bored than the beginning of the movie Contact, kind of. Actually, the book Contact is phenomenal.
Yes, it is. I don't blame them for looking. I mean, look, I think I would be looking too. Now, I think I would be getting to the point where I'd be almost ready to say we've looked at just about everything, frankly, and there's nothing to be heard.
Well, exactly. There's nothing to be heard, and there's never been anything to be heard in the radio bands, and that's why I think it's a waste of money. And because we know this quantum function is faster than light.
We do, but we don't know how to use it.
We do, and that's what I'm going to talk about. There's a biophysicist named Fritz Albert Popp in Germany who proved that living photons, particles of light that come off living things, plants, mainly, and humans, and mammals, marine mammals, dolphins, all of them, it travels faster than the speed of light. So there's something about a living light, auric field that can actually be measured by a good physicist to travel faster than light. But how do you tell it where to go?
Wait a minute. How do you know? I know what an aura is, or an auric field, but how's anybody proven that it travels faster than light?
Well, Fritz Albert Popp took actual measurements using atomic clocks with plants and measuring the speed of the emissions, which were in the visible band of light as well as the invisible. Now, just that point alone, we're not looking at radio waves today, not even in the gigahertz spectrum, that are even close to the color red. So when Fritz Albert Popp is saying that visible light photons coming off of plants and humans are able to go faster than the speed of light, we're not able to do that yet. We don't look at, AM radio is amplitude modulated, FM is frequency modulated. So you frequency modulate data, information, voices, pictures, and everything on a radio wave, and it travels at the speed of light, kind of like passengers on a train. And in the AM band, you amplitude modulate the process of getting the data on the band.
Okay.
But those bandwidths are still nowhere near those colors. So we're nowhere near transmitting and looking at data inside of actual visible light, because visible light is way higher in frequency than
I believe one of the goals of SETI was to begin looking at the light spectrum, wasn't it?
Yeah, but see, that's where you have to you need a sensor, and you need transistors to amplify the signal up to the point that you can actually look at it. And transistors are getting so small now. Like a single Intel computer chip has billions of tiny quartz crystal transistors floating on it, and it's all made, literally it's made under microscopes. You can't see these transistors anymore. I remember the first transistor radios when they came out, and they replaced the tubes, and because they found crystals have tons of unbound electrons floating on their surfaces. They're very powerful, crystals are, and therefore they could use them to amplify signals. And those transistors got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller.
Okay.
But one of the things I did is I looked at the Great Pyramid as a giant crystal oscillator, and I did a huge amount of math on it. It took me a year to calculate all the frequencies the pyramid would generate, and that's when I became convinced. When I looked at the numbers...
Wait. Pyramid would generate or does generate?
It would when it was operating, because you see, the way a crystal oscillator works is, see, there's two things in electronics that make radio possible. Tesla is the true father of radios. Sir Oliver Lodge and Stone developed the tuning circuits for radio, but Tesla, broadcast radio in, I think it was 1893, Chicago World's Fair, and then Marconi, as a lab assistant, allegedly steals it from him, and then it just goes on from there. So radio uses a crystal oscillator to generate a frequency.
Right.
And the way you cut crystal and its size, and you excite electrons in it within a certain amount of voltage and current, you generate different frequencies in the crystal. So the crystal is responsible for the frequency. So whenever you have two oscillators at the same frequency, you have communication. So if everybody's listening to you on an FM band, a frequency modulated band, and they all tune their quartz oscillators via their technology to that frequency, we're all together, all hearing Art Bell. Now, that's only part of radio. The other part of radio was we used to use tubes to amplify the signal because it's so weak with these crystal oscillators so that you could actually hear something.
Well, transistors perform the same function with less noise.
Right. So then we moved on to transistors, and they're the same. They're made out of quartz. They used to make them out of germanium crystal and quartz. And so the crystals are doing the work. And they're doing the tuning and the amplification part of the job.
Okay.
But they don't have the ability to go faster than light. And this is where it's starting to get really interesting, because what I did it was before 2010, on my birthday, which is this Friday, years ago, I decided to actually calculate the frequencies of the Palladian star systems, and I knew how to do it because NASA uses this system called parallax to determine the radius of the star. And they know the radius of 5 Palladian stars 440 light years away. So you're talking about this new exoplanet that's 100,000 light years away. So 1,000 light years.
1,000 light years, yes.
So the Pleiades are 440-ish. There's different depths of stars. But if you know the radius, you can calculate the frequency really easily. So I calculated the frequencies of 5 Palladian suns because NASA knows the radius of 5 of them. And I immediately understood that, first of all, that Tesla actually measured the frequency of the Earth, and Schumann confirmed it, and that every planet and every star has its own frequency, and they're all different because they're all different wavelengths, they're all different sizes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So you take the circumference of the Earth, the speed of light divided by that. It doesn't matter whether you do it in metric or feet and inches. If your resolution's good, you get the same frequency. So I did that for Pleiades, and then I had to do this mathematical scaling technique to scale up the sides of the sphere on the stars, and I generated the frequencies of the Pleiades. And what does radio tell us? It tells us that any two frequencies generated that are the same regardless of their distance, you have communication, at least at the speed of light, and that would be too slow with Pleiades. But my body's biophotons send signals faster than light according to quantum mechanics and according to Einstein and according to...
Okay, I am not familiar with anybody who has measured, and if you can point me in the direction, I'd be glad to read about it, but our auras, they do exist, they can be measured, but I don't think we know the speed of the emission from them.
Yeah, that's Fritz Albert Popp, German physicist, very good physicist, classically trained. He's the one who did it. He's the first one who did it.
How in the world, you said using an atomic clock?
Sure, you use atomic clocks to measure the speed of a transmission of a signal to a receiver, and that he did over and over again. So what he's saying is very remarkable, because Einstein's saying we don't know what the function in quantum mechanics is, that this action at a distance, that if you flip this, particle over on, and it was entangled with another one, regardless of their distance, they respond instantaneously. And then they did experiments with mothers and baby rabbits where they connect their nervous system to electrodes, and they read it on an EEG, if you pinprick the baby, the mother responds instantly, not at the speed of light, instantly through this function. So
yeah, I might buy that, and that somehow brings us to the consciousness thing, I think.
It does, and that's where, now Google this, everybody. Google DNA transistors, and you're going to see, this happened years ago, that the military was developing transistors that interfaced with living tissue because of exactly what I'm talking about. Living tissue has the ability to do this, and you're going to start to see why Colonel Philip Corso said that the Roswell ETs were half living, half technology, half literally solid-state technology. And,
I've had a lot of people on recently that have sort of debunked Corso. You're obviously not one of them.
Well, I'm really deep into Roswell. I mean, I have a lot of data from my friend Boyd Bushman at Lockheed, who passed away. And they,
all right,
you could really go into this. I mean,
well, we could. Hold on. We're at a break. I'm Art Bell. This is Midnight in the Desert with David Serada.
I can see her lying back in her satin dress in a room where you do. Midnight in the Desert spans the world. To call us from outside the U.S. and Canada only, use Skype with a headset mic. If on a computer, and call MITD 55. That's MITD 55.
Well, he glitched out a little, didn't he? That's MITD 55. And if you're calling from a computer, use a headset mic. If you're calling from, I don't know, an iPhone or what have you, just get Skype on it and call us. It'll work. Back now to David Serada, and I've got some things I've got to sort of get straight in my head, David. And here they are. I think we're mixing things up a little bit. Quartz, for example. Indeed, if you pass an excitation through it, or the current, electricity, depending on how it's cut, it will produce a certain frequency, and that is a crystal, right? But transistors are, I just looked up there he is. There he is. I thought we lost you. Transistors are made from various materials, and they're all semiconductors. I'm not really aware, and various types of materials for semiconductors, David, but I'm not aware that crystal is used in transistors.
no, it is. Crystal is a semiconductor, and they you have PNP or NPN transistors. Transistors get really complicated, but they started with germanium. They went to quartz. And, John Bardeen, Will Bratton, and one other physicist were the true fathers of the first transistor, which is 1947, by the way, and when it was invented. And the way they make them now, it's smaller and smaller and smaller. So a semiconductor is a material, basically different types of crystal, that has electrons, unbound electrons, that are not bound to the nucleus of an atom, floating up on their surfaces, which makes them good amplifiers. So transistors amplify the signals, and the crystal oscillators generate frequencies.
Well, they do that. All right, let's go back to Colonel Corso for a moment, because I'm getting so many mixed messages. I interviewed Colonel Corso before he passed, as you know, a series of interviews, actually, and he claimed that he turned over to private industry, piece by piece by piece, technology gleaned from crashed UFOs, crashed the Roswell crash, frankly, and that a lot of what we have today is thanks to that. Now, I've had a lot of criticism lately of Colonel Corso, people not believing his story. Where do you come down?
Well, see, we live in an age where you can counter everything. You can say, like when Boyd Bushman's story leaked prematurely over the internet about his photos of the alien, you really got to go deep. I go really deep in my investigations. I mean, I studied the transistor, semiconductors, electronics. I make my own super inductive coils.
Okay, you're wandering away from the question, which is about Colonel Corso.
Yeah, and that's my point. Do I believe his story? I read the book, and I tend to believe him absolutely because I've seen the evidence firsthand at a level that I've never even revealed yet. I mean, I'm looking at photographs of an alien from Roswell given to me by Boyd Bushman where the flash on the camera seems to have triggered a photoelectric response that sent out a wave that was captured in the photography. And this is not a digital camera that was used. This was a film camera, and the wave coming out of the brain on this thing is electronic. I mean, this thing is...
Are you telling me you've got a picture of an alien creature that is not public?
This particular picture is not public. No, I never went public with it. For the reason, Art, that people don't believe because they don't look at data deep enough. They only look at the surface. And when you look at the surface in an investigation, it's too easy for people to disbelieve because they won't look at everything properly.
All right.
And this particular photo disturbs me because, I was a darkroom master photographer. I looked at film, real film, for 20 years before everything went digital.
Okay, do you think it's legit?
I've never seen anything like this. I'm looking at a photograph with a true photoelectric response from the alleged alien or alien doll, or was it, like Corso said, an AI?
Gee, David, why don't you share this photograph with me?
I will. I will, and I'm making a movie about it, but I want to do it piece by piece, part by part, because this thing really got messed up. This Boyd Bushman story really got messed up. But I believe, exactly like he said, they are part AI, and they, just like we are now doing, we're now making transistors that interface with living DNA for a very good reason, because of the properties of DNA. In fact, the very first successful transistor that John Bardeen and Will Bratton invented was immersed in water. It worked in water, but when they took it out of the water, it didn't work.
Wait, David. I'm sorry to stop you again, but you said we're making transistors that interface with human DNA.
I didn't say human DNA. I said DNA. And
okay, DNA.
DNA is in the middle of every cell. You have the middle of the cell. You have the mitochondria, the power plant of the cell, driving the DNA and the RNA, which builds the protein. So your DNA. Now, this was a study done by the discoverer of the AIDS virus. Luc Montagnier won the Nobel Prize for discovering the AIDS virus, and he does tests on DNA by inducting it with the frequency of Earth, inadvertently 7 hertz. It was lower than the frequency of Earth, so long-wave radio, and the DNA responded to an ultra-low frequency like that.
Really?
And that was shocking.
Actually, that's not shocking. I mean, why would that be shocking? We are creatures of the earth. We come from the earth. Depending on what you believe, God did it all in however many days, or we have slowly emerged from the muck of the earth. So we are part of the earth, are we not?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm not surprised.
Our DNA would read that frequency, and it shocked the researchers for only one reason, is the wavelength of DNA is so small as a coil, if you look at it as an inductor coil, and we can explain inductance really easily, that inductance is, like, and I've done this in my house, so you take one coil, one, like, copper coil, wind up some wire around a cylinder, and connect it to a signal generator, generate a frequency and set it in front of your computer speakers, and you'll hear a tone.
I can explain it even easier. The new Androids use induction to charge. In other words, you take your Android phone, you put it on you just lay it on this thing, and it charges magically. That's induction.
Yeah, that's induction. Induction is transferring energy from one coil to another, and one of them doesn't have any power in it.
That's right.
But this is even a different function of induction. Is I get two coils in the house, right?
Same idea.
I got one in front of my speakers, and I got a signal going through it. My speakers, you can hear the buzzing in the speaker. I go somewhere else in the house, and I plug another coil into another signal generator, And when I match the frequency at a distance, I can hear the second coil in the other room through my speakers, and they're the same frequency, but they're not in phase. They're slightly out of phase. And that's because when you have any two oscillators of any kind, it doesn't even have to be quartz, that are the same frequency, you set up a line of communication.
Okay.
So that's where it gets really interesting when you get into the subject of induction, transferring energy from one coil to another. Because if human DNA can be inducted by the frequency of Earth, which it makes sense, like you just said, right?
Yes.
And the frequency of Earth is where we dream. 7.83 hertz is fundamental, but it actually there's a whole range of frequencies because we have a sphere. When you have a sphere, your wavelength at your equator is like 7.5 hertz, a little under 7.5, and then by the time you're in Norway, you've got really higher frequencies right there. But what's amazing about the frequency of Earth and the fact that DNA will read it is phenomenal. Because what that means is what I did. This is an experiment I just did recently. I take the wavelength of Pluto because we were going to Pluto with New Horizons, and I did this right in tandem when the New Horizons was going by Pluto. I'm lying in my bed, my daughter's asleep next to me and my wife, and I'm pulsing my body with one of my transmitters with the frequency of Pluto. And suddenly I go out of body, I'm at Pluto, and I'm behind Pluto looking towards the sun, and Pluto has a huge atmosphere and all these beautiful colors, and then 5 seconds later I'm back in my body, I'm like, that was perfectly clear. I was out in space looking at Pluto, and NASA doesn't believe it could have an atmosphere. How could it have an atmosphere? It's an icy planet. Well, 3 days later, when New Horizons went beyond Pluto, looking back at the sun, they were shocked. It had an atmosphere 1,500 miles deep, just as I had saw it, remote viewing it with the frequency of Pluto.
Okay, so you remote viewed it. You weren't actually at Pluto.
Well, no, it looked like I was there. Like, I didn't see it in my mind. It's like suddenly I was jolted out of my body. There was this jolt, and I couldn't see my body. There was no astral body.
Okay.
I was looking at Pluto in all perfect clarity, like a perfect movie.
All right, now tell me about these frequencies that I'm staring at in front of me.
Okay, what you're staring at is quite amazing because, using this system called parallax, NASA knows the radius of 5 Palladian stars. So let's start with Pleiades. And the biggest star in Pleiades is the Alcyon. And Alcyon, what I've given you there are the tones where I take the wavelength of the star. And at the equator, you would never hear that because that's ultra, very low frequency radio bands. Typically VLF is 3 to 30,000 hertz, and Earth is 7.83 hertz. So look at the size of Earth. So when you look at the size of a star, and the Palladian suns are younger and bigger than our sun, they're very low frequencies. But the higher up the side of the star you go, the wavelength gets smaller and you can hear it.
All right.
And in fact, NASA actually recorded using a satellite the emissions coming from our sun and recorded the sound of our sun, which means all stars.
Right, we have that also. Let's do one at a time. You're claiming that the sound I have here from Pleiades.
It's based on the mathematical radius of those 5 suns scaled. So when you play this, a lot of the file is inaudible, but it will transmit when you play it. The part that you're hearing is the higher, frequency bands up near the top, near the poles of the stars.
All right. My question is, where did you obtain the recordings we're about to play?
I didn't obtain the recordings. What I did is I got the radius on NASA's website, and based on the radius, I calculated the frequencies, scaled the frequencies mathematically, and then generated them in a frequency generator and recorded it.
Okay.
So
all right, so then we've got the frequency, according to you, of Pleiades, or it's Alcyon, right?
Yeah, it starts with Alcyon. You're going to hear 5 tones, and they're all different because each one of those Palladian stars are different sizes.
And how will this affect people?
Well, what it actually does, especially if you induct the frequencies into people, is you start tuning to that star system, right? So your brain and your nervous system starts becoming tuned to Pleiades, and that's how I made contact with Pleiades.
All right, I'm going to play this first one. Is that all right?
Yeah, there'll be 5 tones.
I understand. Okay, here we go. Here, everybody stand by, and whatever happens, happens, I guess. I didn't like that last one so much.
Yeah, actually, they sound. If you listen to the sound of the sun, it's pretty powerful. It's.
That's where we're going next. You say this is the sound or the frequency of our own sun.
Well, it's a blend. You see, you never get one frequency in a sphere. You get a huge bandwidth of frequencies, and that's why you get a scaling of frequencies. So NASA did this recording of our sun that you're going to.
Of our sun. Okay, this is from NASA. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is from NASA.
Here you go, folks. We've got awfully good audio equipment, frankly. Awfully good. I wonder if that's coming through. People will have to tell me on the wormhole if that's actually coming through. Our audio gear really is good, but you know what? The sound of the sun does, to me, sound like the sun. It really does. If you think of the desert and a really radiating, horrid, hot day, it might sound like this. Sweat on brow. Hot. Yeah.
See, what NASA did there, Art, is you normally wouldn't hear the wavelength, so they compressed the data so that it was a little more dense. But actually, Pythagoras said in deep meditation, he actually heard the sun. He's one of the first to say it. In the Rig Veda, one of these ancient Hindu manuscripts, the mantra Om that people chant is actually a resemblance of the sound of the sun itself. And it goes deeper and deeper in different religious philosophies. The Logos, the actual Logos, this was the original Lord's Prayer in Aramaic in Christianity. Jesus is saying, "O thou from whom the breath of life comes, who fills all realms with sound, light, and vibration." And he actually addresses Logos in John 1. And Logos actually is the sound of the sun. It's the sound of the cosmos. But for us, actually, all of the planets are making sounds and frequencies, and so is the sun.
Right.
What's remarkable, when I measured the wavelengths of all 9 planets, they matched perfectly with all 5 human brainwave states. And that cannot be a coincidence.
That is really interesting, actually. Yes.
It's tremendously interesting. And the fact that we dream at the frequency of our own planet means, do Pleiadians dream at the frequency of their planet and their sun? And do all beings who live all over the universe
That would be
dream?
logical, certainly.
It would make sense.
In other
why
words,
do
we're
we
all
dream
products
in
of...
theta?
Yeah.
We don't dream in delta. We dream in theta, the frequency of Earth. And there's a huge bandwidth there. It's not one frequency like a lot of people think, 7.83. There's bandwidth. Jupiter and Saturn are delta planets. Mars is alpha beta. Mercury is like just under 20 hertz where we allegedly start hearing, although I can hear much lower frequencies than that. And when I measure, I take NASA's radius. So here's how you do the frequency at the equator. You just take NASA's radius, which is exact on the 9 planets, and you go times 2 to get the diameter of the planet, times pi to get the distance around the planet. Now you take the speed of light divided by that, and that's the resonant frequency of the standing wave at the equator. But because it scales, the distance around the Earth gets smaller as you get near the poles. You get this huge range of blending, pulsing frequencies. So that's what I did for Pleiades. I did it for Sirius A and B.
Yeah, I've got Sirius A and B here. Is it long? Do I have time?
No, it's very short. Very short.
Very short. All right.
It's a sample, yeah.
Let's do it. Here it comes. This. Okay, Okay, so that's Sirius A and B, is that correct?
And B is almost the same frequency of Earth. I mean, Robert Temple brought this up in the Sirius Mystery. It's so close to our frequency because it's such a tiny little star that in a way we're already naturally tuned to it. And it makes sense because if you zoomed out in space and you look back at our sun and you look at Sirius A and B and Alpha Centauri, we're like a little constellation. The distance between our stars is very similar to the distance between different Palladian suns in that little cluster. So we're so close. Like when you look at how each star is a different size, and that was actually breaking up a little bit. There's a little bit of scratching going on in there, and because they're very powerful frequencies. But anyway, when you hear them in all their purity, they're with good speakers and everything. They're very, very nice tones. But see, what it means is that if our brain waves all match the wavelengths of the 9 planets,
right,
then we are tuned to this solar system.
All right. All right. We obviously have a break. That's what music means, so hold tight. We'll be right back. David Serada is my guest. I'm Art Bell.
Down around the corner, half a mile from here, see them boys run, and the box of music here. And I love you. Where would you be now? I stay.
Midnight in the Desert, exclusively on the Dark Matter Digital Network with Art Bell. Invite you to call now. 1-952-CALL ART. That's 1-952-225-5278.
All right, so I want to roll over this one more time with David. And the way these tones are derived, other than the sun, which was actually measured by NASA, very interesting. But these other tones are derived by measuring the planet itself. In other words, very much like our own Earth, measuring the size of the planet and various things, and then coming up with a tone, much as you would for Earth. Is that correct, David?
The wavelength, you can even read this on Wikipedia, that the circumference of the planet is the basis for the frequency, because the electromagnetic signal is basically oscillating around the planet, and it doesn't do it perfectly evenly, and it's not just at the equator, because you have a sphere, you get higher and higher frequencies as you get near your poles.
Okay.
So it's a whole blending of frequencies. Like, for example, this is quite shocking, what I'll tell you now, is I'm the first one to do this. I took the capstone base of the Great Pyramid, 572.2, primitive inches, which is almost the same as our inch. There's a difference of 1.00106 inches, so it's almost identical. And the way you calculate the electromagnetic frequency, which is speed of light of a standing oscillating wave around a structure that has excited electrons in it. So the pyramid is made out of 3 different materials. The radioactive granite in the core, which is quite radioactive according to Robert Temple's measurements. And then it's surrounded by the 2 layers of limestone, which are all semiconductors, by the way, and which means they have electrons, unbound electrons on their surfaces. And the electrons get excited by the presence of fire or electricity. So there's 2 ways to excite the electrons in the Great Pyramid to cause it to generate frequencies. So what's shocking is the slope angle of the Great Pyramid is 51 degrees and 51 minutes. So if I take the square base of the capstone of the pyramid, which is 2,288.8 primitive inches, so 572.2 times 4, and then I change it into modern inches, and then I resolve the speed of light in inches, and I calculate the frequency, it's 5151. It's 5.151 megahertz square. That's the same number as the slope angle, which means the builder knew the speed of light, because we didn't know the speed of light even accurately until after 1972. So when Einstein was making a lot of his calculations, we didn't even have an accurate speed of light. The speed of light has to be so perfect in order for me to get the number that I got on the Great Pyramid.
It is very interesting. I'll give you that.
The builder knew the speed of light.
Okay, we have
5.151 megahertz square. So what does that frequency do? why did the Egyptians make such a massive crystal oscillator and we make tiny ones?
Yeah.
Because when you get that many electrons in a massive semiconductor oscillating, you can open up a vortex wormhole, I believe.
Well, that's a reach yet, but we've got two other sounds here, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are they?
We have Vega. Can you see Vega?
Sure.
Vega was the star in the movie Contact. I love the sound of Vega. I mean, on my speakers, it's beautiful.
All right, let's see how they sound on everybody's speakers. This is going to be Vega. Oh, that actually is pretty cool. So that's Vega.
Yeah, and I could scale it even better. I mean, if I had supercomputers, I could get more and more bands of resolution going up the sides of the sphere, and it would be even smoother sounding than that.
All right, I'm going to do Vega again. I liked it. I kind of liked it. Vega, one more time. You could actually hear a little static in the middle of that. That was interesting.
Yeah, that's probably just a little bit of... I don't hear that when I'm playing it here, but it's going through a huge network. What's amazing is you're sending out the frequency of Vega through a huge network, and that frequency is hitting our whole planet right now, which is pretty amazing.
And that's fine.
And does that open a line of communication between us and Vega? And that's what I found.
Okay, that's what I don't get, and we'll come back to that, because we have one more sound, right?
We have one more sound. What is the name on that one?
Spica.
Spica.
Spica, yes.
Spica is in Virgo.
Okay, let's do that one, and then we'll talk about it. Here it is. I think. That one's a little annoying. Anyway,
when those radio astronomers, when they're listening to some of the pulsars and different sounds coming out of the stars, I mean, it's definitely enough to rattle your brain. When I do this, I don't listen to the sounds. I induct my nervous system with a coil, so I don't hear anything because I magnetically transfer the frequency.
All right, but here's what I don't get, David. Here's what I don't get. All right, I get how you came up with the sounds, but you seem to be inferring that if you have this sound and you inductively couple it or whatever you do to get it into your body, and then Vega or whatever you're playing at that moment is also, of course, emanating that sound, you seem to be implying that there's a communication.
Well, see, that's how radio works. Whenever you have two distant frequencies that are identical from an oscillator, a crystal oscillator, you set up the communication and the transistors amplify that, and then you hear it in the speakers. But then you have to modulate your voice or your music or your pictures onto the radio wave or the microwave. So that's how we do it today. But that's too slow. So what we're saying is that there's a faster component in the quantum, function of the atom that sends the signal faster than light because those stars are too far away. Now you're only hearing a tiny part of the frequency of Vega. You're only hearing the part that your speakers can play.
Okay.
The rest of the frequencies are on the file, and believe me, you can try this. You can take a signal generator and put 2 hertz into your speakers and take the cover off your speakers, and you'll see the speaker cone moving around.
Yeah,
so a coil will transmit ultra-low frequencies, even very low frequency.
Right, I get all that. What I don't get is how those frequencies at point A and point B communicate with each other at faster than light.
The frequency doesn't do it. The frequency sets up the resonance of the 2 points because that's how radio works. Any 2 points that are the same frequency set up the communication. The biophotons or the quantum function sends it to Pleiades or Vega because that's it. The universe doesn't get mixed up. There's no other star with those exact frequencies. And because they're all different. This is how the universe created tuning. It created each star with a different sound, a different set of frequencies. And that's why you don't hear, like, remember the old days you got your cordless phone and you could hear your neighbor? You know, if they were too close.
Yes.
And that's because they didn't have enough separation in the frequency. So if there was another planet or star with the same frequency that you were tuning to, we would all be entangled together in that moment. But the universe didn't create planets and stars the same size. In fact, every star NASA measures, they're never the same. They're all different. And when I scale them, they all sound different because the numbers are all different. And
well,
so
if they relate to the size and mass, then yes, of course they're different. They would have
they're all different.
Yeah, they would have
and that sets their own unique frequency apart from every single other star out there.
Okay.
Now, it's true that some can be incredibly close, like Sirius B and Earth are almost the same. They're not really, you know, in the world of radio, you would, you know, if you were tuning down the radio band, you would skip over it. But in the old days with, you know, very low frequency radio, you get a lot of static, but you can hear the other side of the planet. Like, why could you hear, you know, I remember having one of those radios in Long Beach, Vancouver Island. I'm listening to a radio station in Japan. And that's because those long waves wrap around the sphere. Whereas the higher frequencies can't do that. The wavelengths are too short. They won't go around the planet. So that's where it gets really, really amazing, is that when I started doing this, Art, I was, you know, I didn't know what was going to happen. I wasn't, like, trying to point. All I did is I took a recording of my wife, Crystal, singing this beautiful jazz song, Fly Me to the Moon by Frank Sinatra, and I met my wife at the House of Blues with Dan Aykroyd, and beautiful jazz singer, and I just thought, what a great song to send out to the Pleiades. So I did this a different way. I actually encoded her song into the ratio of all the stars, and I sent it out on this transmitter in Sedona, Arizona, and I sent it out, and I said, well, that's probably going to be the end of that fun experiment. And in the middle of the night, I hear an audible voice, not my mind talking to itself, not an intuitive, you know, when you talk to yourself intuitively. This was a very mellow male voice saying, congratulations, we received your message. Now what do you want to ask us? And I leaped out of bed. I was in that half-in, half-out state.
I thought you were going to say it was Frank Sinatra from the other side. No.
It didn't sound like Frank Sinatra, and that would have been nice. And so what I did the next day is like, oh my God, I'm going to record all these questions. Like, where have you been? How come you appeared to me as a kid in 1968 with a flying saucer? Why did you make that contact and then ignore me the rest of my life? I'm recording these in Pro Tools with a good microphone, and I send the questions out through the Palladian harmonics, and holy cow, it's like I opened up a paranormal wormhole in Sedona, and it lasted a long time.
Okay, well, I can't confirm or deny. You know, there's certain aspects of what you say, David, that I understand, and then you make a leap that I don't understand. And
if I call you on the phone and I say, you know, I tell my buddy, you know, mow the lawn this way. You know, you go 4 times on the side and 3 times on the end. And then, you know, he does it wrong. And I said, well, that's what I said on the phone. But you didn't hear me right. You see, when we say that the proof is that we believe that our telephones work is we hear each other. So in the end of the telephone, you need a consciousness to hear the phone call. And if there's no consciousness, did anybody really call you? And did they tell you to mow the lawn this way or that way? And that's where it gets interesting, is because most of what the Palladians have told me, and I've had many, many experiences, including my little 4-year-old daughter, don't even tell her what I'm doing, and she wakes up in the middle of the night and saying, Daddy, I saw a bright light coming, and I jumped up, and that's why I got scared in the middle of the night. I've seen so much proof that this works, and this is how communications works. The next step to prove it to the world is you need that DNA transistor to amplify this ultra-weak signal that the brain is picking up. You see, the brain is able to perceive in delta less than 1 hertz, less than 1 wave a second, right?
And that's where we're going to have to leave her for tonight. Come on back for tomorrow night for the conclusion. Till then, make sure you do like, share, and subscribe. Help us get to that goal of 50,000 views, 1,000 subscribers. If Boxy sends us those nice red packages we can send out to you. And of course, Google puts us on the algorithms. Coinbase, Ibotta, Gain.gg, you know the drill on those three. And until next time, like, share, and subscribe. Be kind to one another. And of course, release the Krakens as we march along this overnight and every overnight here from day one. Have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Enjoy.